We're going to put her into this space scene. I don't know why, it just seemed like a good thing to do. And we're going to have her peeking out from behind one of these planets. If you're going to put something into a scene and you want some things to be in front of it and you want some things to be behind it, there's a bunch of ways we could do that. What's a good technique for kind of making it look like she slipped in behind that planet? Yeah, layers. We've got a layer stack here. Remember, we're looking down through the layer stack. If I just put her on top, and there's a few ways we could do that. Let me pop back over to her here, cutout.tiff. How could I get her over to that stack of planets in such a way that the layer mask goes with her, just in case I need to do some work on that layer mask? How could I get her sent over there with the layer mask intact? Could I do copy and paste? Like select her, copy, and then paste her over? Does copy and paste take a layer mask? It does not. I'd lose the layer mask. I could duplicate her layer. If I right-click on the name Layer 0 and choose Duplicate Layer, or I can go to this little pop-up, this little scrudgy thing at the top right of the Layers panel, and choose Duplicate Layer. For destination, if I just leave it here at cutout, this is the same document that I'm in, I hit OK, it would just duplicate the layer. But if I choose a new destination, in this case the planets.jpg, and I hit OK, looks like nothing happened over here, but when I pop back to my planets image, okay, she's a little bit large. We got the scale inaccurate. That's okay, we'll deal with that later. We could then, to get it look like the planet's in front of her, we could take a section of whatever we want to be in front, raise it to a higher level so it's above her. A lot of people say, well, we've got a layer mask on her. We could use a layer mask to hide her wherever the planet is to reveal the planet below. In that case, we'd be playing around with this layer mask that we very carefully created. And if we had to move her, we might find it difficult to keep that layer mask in alignment. So by making a little section of this background to become part of the foreground, we can keep her as editable as possible. So let's work on that. I'm just going to turn off her eyeball for now. We'll deal with her later. But let's say I want to put her in front of this planet here. A lot like last week when we're looking at the retouching, the guy with the collar that I kind of pushed the collar down. We basically took a section of the collar, moved it down, dropped it back in. In this case, we don't even need to move it anywhere, but I could take a section of this planet, the one that I want to be in front, pop it to a new layer, mask around the outside very carefully, and then slip her in behind that planet. Let's give that a try. First, I'm going to make a really rough selection of the planet that I want her to be behind. And I'll get this one as well, just in case she kind of pops in back there. And what's the keyboard shortcut to take this section, actually make sure I have the background layer selected, to take this section of the background layer and pop it to a new layer? Sneeze? That's not even an option. Command J, that would be better. Command J, boink, and it pops to a new layer. And we'll just take a look at this for a second. Here it is really rough. So we popped her up onto the layer in between the two. So it looks like the planet is floating in front. Again, we got some scale issues with her, and the planet is really roughly cut out, but that's okay. Let's go in, give this planet a layer mask, grab a paintbrush, and same sort of deal. We'll just cut out the planet. Just doing the shift clicking around. And right now, nothing is happening. Why is that? Look at this. I'm cutting around the planet. Okay, so far. Yeah, it's on top of the background layer. So I'm looking down through, and I'm hiding this with a layer mask, but I'm seeing the background layer below. So when we're cutting that out, just turn off the eyeball on that background layer, and that makes it obvious where we've been cutting out. And again, there's a bunch of ways that this could be selected. Even the elliptical marquee tool could probably work for this. And the only place I'm going to have her popping out from behind the planet is up here. So anywhere she's not going to be interfacing with it, the cutout really isn't that important. So I could do as rough a job as I want around this side, as long as kind of this area where she may show up is properly cut out. So I'm just going to do a real rough cutout around here, up here, and then maybe not till up here will I actually start paying attention to what I'm doing again. And I'm going to use the exact same technique for filling in the background as I did for the girl when we were cutting out the background there. I'm just going to take the magic wand, select the background, expand that selection, and fill it with black. Let's take a look at dropping her in behind that planet. So there's the background layer turned on. Looks like absolutely nothing has happened, but there is this little planet floating over top of itself. And because it's in perfect alignment, you don't notice that it's there. But once we turn her on, there she is, hidden behind the planet. Again, we have some scale issues. She's much larger than the planet, so I'm just going to shrink her down a bit, or Command-T. Whoops, I got the planet layer selected. I'm going to select her layer, Command-T. And notice that it's scaling towards that top right corner. Watch this. If I hold Shift and Option, she scales to the center. And then I can slip her down behind said planet. Maybe I'll give her a little bit of a jaunty angle there. So once you've found the size and the angle, hit Return. That accepts the transformation. And stare in wonder at the giant human peeking out from behind a planet, and also in curiosity at this strange dotted line around the outside. Anybody know what's causing that? It's an inaccuracy in the rotation. Remember, your image, when it's on the canvas, your canvas is open in Photoshop and you've got a photograph sitting on top of it, and the pixels of your photograph match up exactly with the pixels of the canvas. And that's intentional. But if you do a slight rotation, what happens to the pixels on your canvas? Are they now lined up with the canvas itself? The pixel images are now tilted. And that's what's happened here. We've taken this image, and when we made the layer mask, the lines were perfectly vertical, and the layer mask edges matched up perfectly with the image edges. Having rotated it, Photoshop had to recalculate how the pixels in this image will line up with the pixels on the canvas, and there were some inaccuracies around the outside. So the rotation of the layer mask, if we look at the layer mask here, you can see those perfectly vertical edges now have some aliasing, some jaggies to them with that soft anti-aliasing in there. And the image itself has some jaggies to it. Actually, if we disable this, there. And they're not quite matching up. What do we do about that? Paint over it. We've got a layer mask here. We'll just grab some black paint and just paint over it. And here's a great use for that shift clicking. Watch this. If I do a click down here, doink, and a shift click up here, doink, and a shift click over here, I'm not going to say doink this time, but you get the idea. We can clean up those edges and just hide that little fringe that was in there. Turn back on the planet, and there she is. Now this is a great time to go in and see if there's anything that we may have missed when we were cutting out the planet. Take a look at this fringe around here. If I turn her off, some of this planet behind, this rather Earth-like planet, was bleeding into that soft edge. What do I do about that? Just take a paintbrush and hide it out. Grab some black paint, and here's a chance to go in and clean up that edge. So you want to make sure you cut in deep enough that you remove any fringing that might be there, but not so deep that you take a chunk out of the planet, because that upsets the inhabitants. And that's how we make it look like this girl is peeking out from behind a planet in very creepy fashion. Now, one last thing I want to show you guys for cleaning up edges on things. If you look at the hair cutout around here, and you know what, I noticed this on the main image before I dropped her into here and before I scaled her down. See how there's some lightness around the outside there? Remember, she was photographed on a beige background. She is no longer on a beige background. She's on a very dark background. And in this softness around the hair, some of that light background is showing through into that dark. What do we do about that? Remember, it's the layer mask that's hiding her beige background. If we disable the layer mask, if I hold down the Shift key and click on that layer mask, all that beige is still there. What if we were to modify this layer mask somewhat? What if, watch this, if I had the layer mask selected, if I went under Image, Adjustments, Levels, if I were to darken down this layer mask, look at that, there's more black showing. If I do that while the image is visible, Image, Adjustments, Levels, look at what happens. We can clean some of that. Now, we do get a bit of a harder edge. I could then blur that layer slightly. But there's another way of doing this as well. Watch this. With this layer selected, if I go under Select and choose Select and Mask, and this could be even more effective than simply by adjusting the layer mask directly. We've got things like edge detection. And watch this. If I bring the radius up, right now it's at 0 pixels. So here's the edge of the background. And 0 pixels, it's not looking anywhere to see if it can do a better job. But if I bring this radius up, say I bring it up to, say, 2 pixels here, it's going to look 2 pixels on either side of the edge. It's going to look into the beige background. It's going to look into the red hair, 2 pixels, and try to figure out what's background and what's foreground. And it'll try to refine that mask. And if I do the show original up here, or hit P, this is what it looked like when we first brought it in, and this is what it looks like now. Actually, not that much better. There's other options. Shift edge. If I pull this shift edge inwards to the left, look at what happens. See how that edge is moving inwards toward the subject. And if it comes out a little bit harsh, we could feather that edge a little. Okay, that's a bit much. We can try to soften up that edge. And again, if we show the before and after, you can see she looks much better blended into that background there. You'll also notice that it made a duplicate of the layer. Whenever you use the refine edge command, it makes a duplicate of the original background, the original layer mask and layer, and it turns off the visibility of the original, and it only shows the second. And you can see the difference in that layer mask. There's the original layer mask, and there's the modified. So you can see it kind of takes some of that fringing off the outside.